Hello, welcome to the Minutes of Wisdom channel. Today, we're going to tell the complete story of the book of Exodus from the Bible. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thank you.
The descendants of Jacob, totaling 70, including Joseph who was already in Egypt, settled there. After Joseph and his generation passed away, the Israelites multiplied greatly, causing concern for a new Egyptian king who enslaved them. Despite harsh oppression, the Israelites continued to multiply. The king ordered Hebrew boys to be killed at birth, but the midwives disobeyed, fearing God. As a result, the Israelites continued to flourish, and the midwives were blessed. Pharaoh then commanded all Hebrew boys to be thrown into the Nile. A Levite couple had a son, whom they hid for 3 months. Unable to conceal him any longer, they placed him in a basket among the reeds by the Nile. Pharaoh's daughter found the baby and decided to adopt him, naming him Moses. Moses, as he grew, witnessed the oppression of his people and killed an Egyptian who was mistreating a Hebrew. Fearing Pharaoh's wrath, he fled to Midian, where he rescued Jethro's daughters and married one of them, Zipporah. They had a son named Gershom. Meanwhile, the Israelites suffering in Egypt led them to cry out to God, who remembered his covenant with their ancestors and looked upon them with compassion. Moses, while tending sheep, encounters a burning bush that isn't consumed. God speaks to him from the bush, telling Moses to remove his sandals because he's standing on holy ground. God reveals his plan to rescue the Israelites from Egypt and sends Moses to Pharaoh. Moses hesitates, questioning his capability, but God assures him of his presence. God reveals his name as I am who I am and instructs Moses to tell the Israelites that I am has sent him. God promises to lead the Israelites to a land of abundance. Moses is to gather the elders and inform them of God's plan. Though the journey won't be easy, God will compel Pharaoh to release them. God promises to make the Egyptians generous, and the Israelites will leave Egypt with wealth. Moses expresses concern about being believed by the Israelites. God provides miraculous signs, turning Moses' staff into a snake and back, making Moses' hand leprous, then healing it, and turning water into blood. Moses worries about his speaking ability, but God promises to help him. Still hesitant, Moses asks to be excused, but God insists he go. Aaron, Moses' brother, is designated as Moses' spokesperson. Moses returns to Egypt with his family and meets Aaron. They perform signs before the Israelite elders, who believe and worship God. Moses and Aaron ask Pharaoh to let the Israelites go into the wilderness to worship God. Pharaoh refuses and increases the Israelites' workload, demanding they gather their own straw for brickmaking. Despite the harsh treatment, the Israelites are expected to maintain their brick production. When they complain, Pharaoh accuses them of laziness and increases their workload further. The Israelite overseers blame Moses and Aaron for their plight. Moses questions God about the worsening situation, feeling that his efforts have only brought trouble to his people without any relief.
God reassures Moses that he will show his power to Pharaoh and deliver the Israelites from Egypt. He reminds Moses of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and promises to redeem the Israelites from slavery and bring them to the promised land. Moses shares this with the Israelites, but they are too discouraged to listen. Despite Moses' doubts, God commands him to speak to Pharaoh. The text then lists the genealogy of Moses and Aaron, emphasizing their role in leading the Israelites out of Egypt. God tells Moses and Aaron that Pharaoh will not listen to them, but he will use them to display his power. Aaron's staff turns into a snake before Pharaoh, but the Egyptian magicians replicate the feat Aaron's snake swallows theirs. Despite this, Pharaoh's heart remains hardened. God instructs Moses and Aaron to confront Pharaoh at the Nile, warning of turning the water into blood. Aaron stretches his staff over the waters, turning them into blood, causing the fish to die and making the water undrinkable. However, the Egyptian magicians replicate this miracle. Pharaoh remains stubborn, and the Egyptians suffer from the polluted water. God instructs Moses to warn Pharaoh of a plague of frogs if he refuses to let the Israelites go. Aaron stretches his hand over the waters, causing frogs to swarm Egypt. However, the Egyptian magicians replicate this. Pharaoh pleads with Moses to remove the frogs, and Moses agrees to pray for their removal. When the frogs die, Pharaoh reneges on his promise. God then commands Aaron to strike the dust, causing gnats to infest Egypt, but the magicians cannot replicate this. Pharaoh remains obstinate. Next, God warns of a swarm of flies, but the land of Goshen is spared. Pharaoh offers to let the Israelites sacrifice in Egypt, but Moses insists on a 3-day journey. Pharaoh agrees, but once the flies are removed, he hardens his heart again. God instructs Moses to warn Pharaoh of a plague on Egypt's livestock if he refuses to let the Israelites go. The next day, all Egyptian livestock die, but none of the Israelites. God then commands Moses to throw soot into the air, causing boils on people and animals. Despite the suffering, Pharaoh remains stubborn. Moses warns of an impending hailstorm, sparing those who heed his warning. When the hail falls, destroying crops and animals, Pharaoh finally concedes, only to harden his heart once more when the storm ends. God instructs Moses and Aaron to confront Pharaoh once more, warning of a locust plague if he refuses to release the Israelites. Despite the devastation caused by the locusts, Pharaoh remains obstinate. Pharaoh's officials urge him to let the Israelites go, recognizing the ruin brought upon Egypt. Pharaoh relents momentarily but restricts the Israelites from bringing their families and livestock. Moses warns of darkness spreading over Egypt, and the darkness comes for 3 days, but the Israelites have light. Pharaoh offers to let the Israelites go but without their livestock, but Moses insists on bringing everything for sacrifice. Pharaoh refuses, and God hardens his heart.
God informs Moses of the final plague that will convince Pharaoh to release the Israelites. He instructs the Israelites to borrow silver and gold from their Egyptian neighbors. Moses warns Pharaoh of the impending death of every firstborn in Egypt, from Pharaoh's son to the son of a female slave. He emphasizes that the Israelites will be spared, showing God's distinction between them and the Egyptians. Despite Moses' warnings and the wonders performed, Pharaoh's heart remains hardened, and he refuses to let the Israelites go. God instructs Moses and Aaron to establish the Passover celebration as a lasting ordinance for the Israelites. They are told to select a lamb without defect on the 10th day of the first month, keep it until the 14th day, and slaughter it at twilight. The blood of the lamb is to be put on the doorframes, and the Israelites are to eat the roasted meat with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. This ritual will spare their households from the plague that will strike down every firstborn in Egypt, including animals. The Israelites are also commanded to eat unleavened bread for 7 days, celebrating the festival of unleavened bread. Moses instructs the elders of Israel to obey these commands, and they worship and obey. At midnight, the Lord strikes down the firstborn in Egypt, prompting Pharaoh to demand that Moses and the Israelites leave immediately. The Egyptians urge them to go, and the Israelites depart with haste, taking silver, gold, and clothing as plunder from the Egyptians. They journey from Ramesses to Sukkot, numbering about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. They bake unleavened bread with the dough they brought from Egypt, as they had no time to prepare leavened bread. After 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions leave Egypt. God establishes regulations for the Passover meal, including who may partake and the manner in which it should be eaten. All the Israelites obey God's commands, and on that day, the Lord brings them out of Egypt by their divisions. God instructs Moses to consecrate every firstborn male to him, both human and animal, as a reminder of the day the Israelites came out of Egypt. They are commanded to commemorate this day by eating unleavened bread for 7 days, starting in the month of Aviv. This observance is to be a sign and a reminder of the Lord's mighty hand in delivering them from slavery. When they enter the land promised to them, they must continue this tradition, giving the firstborn of every womb to the Lord. This act will serve as a reminder of how the Lord brought them out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt, taking Joseph's bones with them as he had requested. God guides them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, never leaving their side as they journey through the desert toward the Red Sea. God instructs Moses to lead the Israelites to camp near the sea, prompting Pharaoh to pursue them. As the Egyptians approach, the Israelites panic and blame Moses for their predicament. Moses reassures them, telling them to stand firm and witness the deliverance God will bring. God commands Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea, dividing it so the Israelites can pass through on dry ground. Meanwhile, the Egyptians pursue them, but God throws them into confusion, allowing the Israelites to cross safely. As the Egyptians follow, God instructs Moses to stretch out his hand again, causing the waters to flow back and drown the pursuing army. The Israelites witness this miraculous deliverance and put their trust in God and Moses. Moses and the Israelites sing a song of praise to the Lord for their deliverance from Pharaoh's army at the Red Sea. They extol God's strength, defense, and salvation, recounting how he defeated their enemies and led them safely through the sea on dry ground. Miriam leads the women in a dance of celebration. After crossing the Red Sea, Moses leads the Israelites into the desert of Shur, where they struggle to find water. They come to Marah, where the water is bitter, but God provides a solution by showing Moses a piece of wood to sweeten the water. God also promises to protect them from diseases if they obey his commands. Finally, they reach Elim, where they find water and rest.
The Israelites, traveling through the desert of Sin, grumble against Moses and Aaron, expressing their longing for the food they had in Egypt. God promises to provide bread from heaven and meat in the evening. Quail cover the camp in the evening, and in the morning, there is dew with thin flakes like frost on the ground, which the Israelites call manna. Moses instructs them to gather only what they need each day, but some keep it until morning, resulting in it being spoiled. On the sixth day, they gather twice as much, and Moses commands them to save some for the Sabbath. Those who go out to gather on the Sabbath find none, as God commands them to rest. The Israelites call the bread manna and eat it for 40 years until they reach the promised land. The Israelites, traveling from the desert of Sin, arrive at Rephidim, where they find no water. They quarrel with Moses, accusing him of bringing them out of Egypt to die of thirst. Moses, troubled, cries out to the Lord, who instructs him to strike a rock at Horeb, from which water miraculously flows. This incident is called Massah and Meribah, signifying the Israelites' testing of the Lord. Later, the Amalekites attack the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses instructs Joshua to fight, while he, Aaron, and Hur go to the top of a hill. As long as Moses holds up his hands, the Israelites prevail, but when he grows tired, Aaron and Hur support him. Joshua defeats the Amalekites, and the Lord promises to blot out their name. Moses builds an altar called "The Lord is my banner" and declares that the Lord will be at war with the Amalekites from generation to generation. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, visits Moses in the wilderness, bringing Moses' wife and sons. Moses recounts the miraculous events of Israel's deliverance from Egypt to Jethro, who rejoices in the Lord's goodness. Jethro offers sacrifices to God and shares a meal with Moses, Aaron, and the elders of Israel. Observing Moses' role as judge for the people, Jethro advises him to delegate authority and appoint capable leaders to share the workload. Moses heeds Jethro's advice and appoints leaders over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. These leaders assist in judging the people, relieving Moses of the burden. Jethro then returns to his own country. The Israelites arrive at the desert of Sinai, where Moses ascends the mountain to receive instructions from God. God instructs Moses to convey to the Israelites that if they obey his covenant, they will become his treasured possession, a kingdom of priests, and a holy nation. Moses relays God's message to the people, who agree to abide by it. God commands Moses to consecrate the people and set boundaries around the mountain, warning them not to approach it. On the third day, amid thunder, lightning, and a trumpet blast, God descends upon Mount Sinai in fire, causing the people to tremble. Moses is called up the mountain by God, who instructs him to warn the people not to approach or else they may perish. Moses relays this warning to the people, emphasizing the need for consecration, and then goes back up the mountain with Aaron. God delivers the 10 Commandments to Moses and the Israelites, emphasizing his exclusive authority and warning against idolatry, misuse of his name, and various forms of wrongdoing. The people are awed by the display of divine power and request Moses to be their intermediary. Moses reassures them, explaining that God's presence is a test to instill reverence and deter sin. The people maintain their distance as Moses approaches God. God instructs Moses to convey the commandments and warns against idolatry, detailing guidelines for constructing altars for offerings.
These laws outline regulations regarding Hebrew servants, including their release after 6 years of service unless they choose to stay. It also addresses the rights of female servants and the consequences for mistreatment. Laws concerning personal injury, manslaughter, family relationships, and property damage are delineated, along with penalties for various offenses, including death for serious crimes like murder and parental disrespect. Additionally, regulations for compensating victims and resolving conflicts involving animals are detailed. These regulations cover various scenarios of theft, property damage, and legal disputes. They stipulate penalties for theft, including restitution and double repayment if the stolen item is found alive. They also address cases of negligence, such as letting livestock graze on someone else's land or starting a fire that damages another's property. Additionally, they outline rules for handling stolen goods, resolving disputes, and making restitution. Furthermore, laws regarding sexual conduct, treatment of foreigners, care for widows and orphans, fair lending practices, and honoring God's commands are included. These commandments cover various aspects of social conduct and religious observance. They emphasize the importance of truthfulness, impartiality in legal matters, and compassion towards others, including enemies and foreigners. 1. You shall have no other gods before me. 2. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything. 3. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. 4. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 5. Honor your father and your mother. 6. You shall not murder. 7. You shall not commit adultery. 8. You shall not steal. 9. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. 10. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, wife, or property. They also prescribe agricultural practices such as allowing the land to rest and observing festivals as acts of worship. Additionally, they warn against idolatry and instruct on how to worship and serve the Lord. Furthermore, they promise divine protection and prosperity for obedience but warn of consequences for disobedience, including expulsion from the land.
Moses, along with Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel, were called by the Lord to worship at a distance. Moses alone was to approach the Lord, while the others and the people were to stay back. Moses conveyed the Lord's words and laws to the people, and they agreed to obey. Moses wrote down the covenant, built an altar, and made offerings. He sprinkled blood on the altar and the people, sealing the covenant. Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and the elders went up the mountain, where they saw God. Moses then went further up the mountain with Joshua. The glory of the Lord covered Mount Sinai, and Moses entered the cloud for 40 days and nights. The Lord instructed Moses to ask the Israelites for offerings, including materials like gold, silver, and bronze, as well as textiles, wood, and various spices and stones. With these offerings, they were to construct a sanctuary for the Lord to dwell among them, following a precise pattern. Moses was to oversee the creation of an ark of acacia wood overlaid with gold, containing the tablets of the covenant law. He was also to make an atonement cover with 2 cherubim, a table for the bread of the presence, and a lampstand of pure gold with its accessories. All these items were to be crafted according to the pattern shown to Moses on the mountain.
The instructions given to Moses for constructing the tabernacle included making 10 curtains of finely twisted linen, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn with cherubim woven into them. These curtains were to be joined in sets of 5, with loops and clasps to fasten them together. Additionally, curtains of goat hair were to be made for the tent over the tabernacle, joined in sets of 5 and 6, with loops and bronze clasps. Coverings of ram skins dyed red and other durable leather were to be made for the tent. Upright frames of acacia wood were to be constructed, with crossbars and gold overlays, to support the tabernacle. A curtain of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn with cherubim woven into it was to be made to separate the holy place from the most holy place. Finally, a curtain for the entrance to the tent, also made of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, was to be hung with gold hooks on posts of acacia wood overlaid with gold. Instructions were given to build an altar of acacia wood, overlaid with bronze, with horns at each corner. Utensils for the altar were to be made of bronze, including pots, shovels, sprinkling bowls, meat forks, and fire pans. A bronze grating with rings at the corners was to be placed halfway up the altar. Poles of acacia wood, overlaid with bronze, were to be made for carrying the altar. The courtyard for the tabernacle was to have curtains of finely twisted linen supported by posts with bronze bases. The entrance to the courtyard was to have a curtain of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, with silver bands and hooks on the posts and bronze bases. All the other articles used in the service of the tabernacle, as well as the oil for the lamps, were to be made of bronze or clear oil of pressed olives. Aaron and his sons were instructed to keep the lamps burning before the Lord from evening till morning, as a lasting ordinance among the Israelites.
Aaron, along with his sons Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar, were appointed to serve as priests. Sacred garments were to be made for Aaron to give him dignity and honor. Skilled workers were instructed to craft these garments for Aaron's consecration. The garments included an ephod, a breastpiece, a robe, a woven tunic, a turban, and a sash, all made of gold, blue, purple, scarlet yarn, and fine linen. The ephod, adorned with 2 onyx stones engraved with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel, had gold filigree settings and chains. The breastpiece, also adorned with precious stones representing the tribes of Israel, had gold rings and chains attached to the ephod. The robe, entirely of blue cloth, had pomegranates and gold bells around its hem. A plate of pure gold inscribed with "Holy to the Lord" was to be attached to Aaron's turban. Fine linen tunics, turbans, sashes, and caps were also made for Aaron's sons. After putting on these garments, Aaron and his sons were anointed and ordained to serve as priests. Linen undergarments were required for them to wear whenever they entered the tent of meeting or approached the altar to minister, ensuring they would not incur guilt and die. To consecrate Aaron and his sons as priests, Moses was instructed to take a young bull and 2 rams without defect, along with offerings of wheat flour and olive oil. Aaron and his sons were to be washed with water and dressed in sacred garments. Anointing oil was poured over Aaron's head, and his sons were clothed in tunics and caps. Aaron and his sons were to lay their hands on the bull and rams, and the animals were to be slaughtered at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The blood of the bull was to be placed on the horns of the altar, and its fat and organs burned on the altar. 1 ram was offered as a burnt offering, and the other ram's blood was used to consecrate Aaron and his sons, along with anointing oil. Portions of the ram were waved before the Lord as an offering, and Aaron's descendants were to wear his sacred garments. For 7 days, sacrifices were to be made, and the altar consecrated. Regular offerings were also prescribed for each day. Through these rituals, the tent of meeting, the altar, and Aaron and his sons were consecrated, and the presence of the Lord among the Israelites was assured. Moses was instructed to make an altar of acacia wood for burning incense, overlaying it with pure gold. Fragrant incense was to be burned on it every morning and evening as a perpetual offering before the Lord. No other incense or offerings were to be made on this altar. Aaron was to annually make atonement on the altar's horns with the blood of the sin offering. Additionally, each Israelite, 20 years old or more, was to give a half shekel as an offering to the Lord when a census was taken. This offering was to atone for their lives and support the service of the tent of meeting. A bronze basin and stand were to be made for washing between the tent of meeting and the altar, where Aaron and his sons were to wash their hands and feet to avoid death when entering the tent or approaching the altar. Moses was then instructed to take fine spices and olive oil to make a sacred anointing oil for consecrating the tent of meeting, the ark, the altar, and other items, as well as anointing Aaron and his sons for the priesthood. This anointing oil was to be considered sacred and was not to be replicated or used for any other purpose. Additionally, Moses was instructed to make a fragrant blend of incense to be placed in front of the Ark of the Covenant law, which was to be considered most holy and not replicated for personal use.
The Lord appointed Bezalel, son of Uri, from the tribe of Judah, and filled him with the Spirit of God, wisdom, understanding, and skill in craftsmanship to create various artistic designs and work with different materials. Oholiab, from the tribe of Dan, was also chosen to assist Bezalel. All skilled workers were given the ability to create everything needed for the tent of meeting and its furnishings, including the sacred garments for Aaron and his sons, as well as the anointing oil and fragrant incense. The Lord instructed the Israelites to observe the Sabbath as a sign of their covenant with Him, emphasizing its holiness and the consequences for desecrating it. The Sabbath was to be celebrated for generations to come as a lasting covenant between the Lord and the Israelites, symbolizing His creation of the heavens and the earth in 6 days and His rest on the seventh day. After speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai, the Lord gave him the 2 tablets of the covenant law, inscribed by the finger of God. When Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people asked Aaron to make gods for them. Aaron crafted a golden calf, and the people worshipped it, leading to God's anger. Moses interceded, asking God to spare the people. God relented but punished them. Moses broke the tablets and destroyed the calf. He called for those loyal to God to rally to him. The Levites responded, and Moses ordered them to kill those involved. About 3,000 died. Moses pleaded for forgiveness and offered to bear the consequences. God punished the people with a plague because of the calf.
God instructs Moses to lead the Israelites to the promised land, but he will not go with them due to their stubbornness. The people mourn and remove their ornaments. Moses sets up a tent of meeting outside the camp, where God speaks with him. Moses asks God to accompany them, and God agrees, promising his presence and rest. Moses requests to see God's glory, and God agrees to show his goodness and proclaim his name. However, Moses cannot see God's face but only his back. God instructs Moses to chisel 2 stone tablets like the first ones and ascend Mount Sinai alone. There, God reveals himself to Moses, proclaiming his name and attributes. Moses pleads for God's presence and forgiveness for the people's sins. God renews his covenant with Moses, commanding obedience and outlining various laws and rituals. Moses writes down these words and spends 40 days and nights with the Lord, receiving the 10 commandments. When Moses descends the mountain, his face is radiant from being in God's presence, causing fear among the Israelites. He covers his face with a veil, speaking with the people and conveying God's commands.
Moses gathers the Israelites and relays the commandments from the Lord. He instructs them to observe the Sabbath and to contribute materials and skills for building the tabernacle and making sacred garments. The community willingly brings offerings, including gold, silver, bronze, textiles, and other materials. Skilled individuals are appointed to lead the construction, and the people generously offer their talents and resources. Moses highlights Bezalel and Oholiab as particularly gifted artisans chosen by God for this task. Bezalel, Oholiab, and the skilled workers receive the offerings from the Israelites to construct the sanctuary. Moses tells the people to stop bringing offerings because they have more than enough. The skilled workers make the tabernacle with finely woven curtains of linen and yarn, joined with loops and clasps. They make curtains of goat hair and coverings of ram skins and other durable leather. Frames of acacia wood are built, overlaid with gold, and fitted with crossbars. The curtain for the entrance is made with embroidered yarn and linen, supported by posts overlaid with gold.
Bezalel and his team crafted various sacred items for the sanctuary. They made the ark of acacia wood, overlaid with pure gold, with cherubim at each end. They also crafted the table of acacia wood, overlaid with gold, with rings and poles for carrying, and various utensils made of pure gold. The lampstand, also of pure gold, featured intricate almond flower designs with cups, buds, and blossoms. They made the altar of incense from acacia wood overlaid with gold, with horns and rings for carrying. Additionally, they prepared the sacred anointing oil and fragrant incense. The craftsmen constructed various items for the tabernacle and its courtyard. They built the altar of burnt offering from acacia wood and bronze, with horns at the corners and utensils made of bronze. A bronze basin and stand were made from mirrors donated by the serving women. The courtyard had curtains of finely twisted linen supported by posts and bases, with silver hooks and bands. The entrance curtain was embroidered with blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. The materials used were recorded, including the gold, silver, and bronze offerings. The bronze was used for various bases, the altar, and tent pegs.
The craftsmen created garments for ministering in the sanctuary and sacred garments for Aaron as instructed by Moses. They crafted the ephod, breastpiece, robe, tunics, and other attire using gold, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen. They made bells and pomegranates to adorn the robe. The plate with the inscription "Holy to the Lord" was attached to Aaron's turban. Everything was made according to the Lord's commands, and when Moses inspected the work, he saw that it was done as instructed and blessed the craftsmen.
Moses follows the Lord's instructions meticulously, setting up the tabernacle and its furnishings. He places the ark, table, lampstand, and altar as directed. Aaron and his sons are anointed and consecrated for priesthood. Moses completes every detail according to the Lord's commands, including setting up the courtyard and conducting the rituals of washing and offering sacrifices. Finally, the glory of the Lord fills the tabernacle, signifying divine presence among the Israelites, guiding them in their travels with a cloud by day and fire by night. Thank you for watching. If you'd like, please leave a comment letting us know what you thought of the video and also make your request. Which book of the Bible would you like me to cover next? See you next time.